Stress is not just in your head. Give me a couple of minutes and I'll explain how something mental like stress produces real physical changes in the body. So to start with, we need to understand that stress is a reaction mechanism. It's something that it uses to keep us safe. Your body and mind, to an extent, can't really tell the difference between something dangerous like an animal compared to something stressful like having an argument with somebody, or a thought that we have, or a perception that we have. So it doesn't matter whether we have something dangerous happening to us or we have a work deadline coming up, our bodily perception and our chemical changes are pretty much exactly the same. And it makes sense that we have this system. It keeps us safe. It's called the fight or flight system. It means we're going to fight whatever's in front of us, or we can run away from whatever's in front of us. So when we have that stressful trigger, whatever it is, whether it's a perception, whether it's what someone says, or whether it's something genuinely dangerous, the first thing it's going to start to affect is what's happening up here. That's in the frontal lobe. That's going to start to affect how we see things, and it's going to then start to change the blood flow within the brain. The blood is then going to start to flow more towards these rear areas, like we see the occipital lobe, the parietal lobe, partly to the cerebellum. This is going to help us better with our balance, going to help with sharper vision, help with better hearing, and also start to send more messages to our muscles that they may need to react very soon. This will also start to stimulate another part of the brain, the little yellow part that we can see here. This is called the hypothalamus, and this is going to then start to send a chemical cascade further down in the body. That chemical change from the brain is going to be via hormones. It's going to send information down through to the kidneys or to what we call the adrenal glands. So if you ever hear someone talk about the idea of having adrenaline or this rush of adrenaline, what they're really talking about is stimulation of these glands, which can then start to produce that feeling of that rush in the body. This stimulation of the adrenal glands can then start to send adrenaline into the blood, and that's going to start to stimulate different parts of the body. As you can see here, one thing is going to be going to the heart. It's going to increase the output. By increasing output, this means increasing the rate of the heart and increasing potentially the blood pressure as well, as more blood may be needed in certain parts of the body, like the arms and like the legs. It should be noted that it's not just going to be going to the main organs and to the muscles. There's also going to be this negative feedback loop, which will send it back towards the brain. This negative feedback loop can be a reason for some of these feelings that we can see up here. We'll come back to them later. So as mentioned, as part of that fight or flight response, it means that more blood flow is going to go through the body, and it's going to start to go to certain areas which are more stimulated to have what we call vasodilation, essentially more opening of the blood vessels in that area. And primarily, this is going to be towards your legs and towards your arms, because these are things that you need if you're going to fight or run away from something. And this is why when you're stressed, you feel like things are getting tense in the body. You feel like your arms, your shoulders, your neck, maybe even sometimes your lower back, everything starts to get tighter. It's a natural way your body is trying to help and try to protect you. In some ways, it does make sense. But the problem is if it's happening not just when you are in danger, but happening habitually, happening every day, even when there's no trigger or stressor or thing that should be causing that level of stress for you. So over time, stress is going to result in the muscles feeling much tighter and much tenser. This is why you may see some people where they have long levels of prolonged stress, and it's like their neck is almost like disappearing into their shoulders. And again, in the short term, this makes perfect sense. It's very important that you have some level of reaction to stress when you need it to keep you safe. However, the problem is when this happens on a chronic basis and it keeps happening day by day. So my question would be that if you have increased blood flow going towards the heart, which is then sending it towards the big muscles like in the arms, the shoulders, the legs, where does the blood come from? It's come from the heart, but it has to come away from some other places because we don't have unlimited amounts of blood in the body. This is what starts to explain some of the other symptoms you can see here on the screen, such as affecting things like cardiovascular health, affecting the joints, as we understand through the muscles, but also reduction in blood flow towards the immune system, affecting what's happening in the gut and the digestive system, and even affecting reproductive health. This is a much more simplified version, but for a lot of people with high levels of stress, especially over a long period of time, this is like the classic things that they see. Maybe they have a headache, they feel a bit short of breath, they have tense muscles, a rapid heart rate, some stomach issues, all coming together, but it feels like they're not related. And coming back to these symptoms, we mentioned about how there's some other changes going on in the brain. It's not just the other parts of the body. When there's that increased amount of cortisol coming back to the body and of course here to the brain, it starts to affect some of these other pathways, particularly the dopamine and the serotonin pathways. This is how something goes from being a particular stressful event to being something that affects mental health overall. Dopamine pathways get affected, particularly here in that frontal lobe, because that's where the main receptors are. And then for serotonin pathways, that gets affected in other parts of the brain, as we can see up here in the parietal. What started as a stressful event is now starting to affect long-term mental health. If we're looking at the serotonin pathways, that's where we can see effects on things like sleep, cognition, memory, and mood. And the dopamine pathways, this is kind of always seen as being like the happiness hormone or the happiness part of the receptors in the brain. It starts to affect how we see rewarding motivations, how we perceive pleasure, some of the motor functions we have, because that's a big part of the frontal cortex as well, and also how compulsive we are. A lot of people, when they are depressed or they have more mental health issues, can be more compulsive by nature. As we can see, mental stress is not just in our heads. It starts to affect us in a real physical way, and this is something we've been able to see with the research for many years. It may start to affect just something in our brain through our perception, but that then starts to change the blood flow within the brain, starts to affect what's happening with the hypothalamus, goes down to the adrenal glands, starts to release adrenaline, that starts to release cortisol into the body, and then suddenly we're having this whole cascade of problems going on. It leads to muscles getting tighter and tighter. It leads to other parts of the body which are vital, like say our digestion, like our immune system, like our reproductive system, not functioning quite as well. And the more it happens, the more it becomes this negative feedback loop that keeps repeating. And this is also partly why it's so important to manage our mental health. Our mental health is not just mental health, it also becomes truly our physical health.